We begin with the U.S. government shutdown now in its third week. The effects are starting to ripple through local communities, from military families and travel at airports to millions of Floridians on food assistance. There is plenty of uncertainty. Here's a look at how the shutdown is being felt across West Central Florida.
Thousands of federal workers in our area are either furloughed or working without pay. From TSA agents and air traffic controllers to staff at MacDill Air Force Base, Tampa International Airport is partnering with local organizations to provide assistance, but also warns extended staffing shortages would impact travel. Military families are also seeing delayed or inaccurate paychecks. For low-income Floridians, the concern is food. Nearly 3 million people in our state rely on SNAP, and more than 500,000 depend on WIC. That's food aid for women and children. Both programs are currently funded, but for how long remains in question. Doing its part, Feeding Tampa Bay launched an emergency program to help federal workers and military families in the region who suddenly find themselves without any income. Programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security remain operational, but recipients should expect delays for new claims, changes, or requests for support.
And of course, this is just a fraction of the impacts that are being felt by the shutdown. Rebecca, I'd like to start with you. You said that you were surprised by the angle of the story. You did a special report for the Tampa Bay Times, and tell our viewers about what you learned in your story.
Yeah, so one of the many programs that's being affected by this is the National Flood Insurance Program, which is how most people in this country get their flood insurance. In many places in Florida, you need to get flood insurance. So with this program shut down right now, they're not able to write any new policies, and they're not able to renew any existing policies if those are due now. So this is holding up a lot of people's process of buying a home, because you have to have insurance if you're going to close on the home. So that could affect those people. And then what's even more than that is if there were to be a hurricane, they may not be able to open any new claims, which could really hurt a lot of people.
And typically when you hear about the government shutdown, you think of the courts, how their impact. You think of our service members who are, whether or not they're being paid. When viewers look at the debates that are going on between the Republican leadership and the Democratic leadership, Mitch, how do you think this is playing out in Main Street
right.
USA?
Well, this is a different kind of shutdown because the Democrats are the ones doing it this time, right? That's the way it usually works. Democrats are the party of the government. You know, some would say big government, but this is different. But obviously, they're trying to make a point about these healthcare subsidies going away on December 31st. You know, Republicans have said, the leadership has said, like, hey, we can deal with that, but let's get this, continuing resolution passed through November. Obviously, Dems, kind of have the wind to their back, and that this is a popular issue. The Democrats have been in the wilderness last year. This is a good issue for them. Now, the subsidies, were pretty strong during COVID, actually. I was on the ACA a decade ago. I wish I had the subsidies, which people get now, actually, because I had to pay actually a lot. So they need to negotiate that. But look, as the piece shows here, people are getting hurt, and it's only going to get worse. We're starting week 3 right now. I think people, the military did get paid this week, but in a couple of weeks, there's no funding mechanism we know right now. It's going to get a little hairy. And, the last big shutdown, I think, was 35 days under Trump in 2017, 18. What you hear from people in Washington is this could go beyond that.
Thomas, you all have basically, you're not waiting for the politicians to take action. You all have started this program specifically to help federal workers in our community, service members. Explain to our viewers the impact that you think, how many families will benefit from this?
Yeah, so I think what we've heard so far and what you're discussing is we don't truly know numbers of people impacted because the clarity of what will and will not be supported is not known to us at this point. But we have probably close to 3,000 federal workers that work at TSA, airports, port security, and the military that are contractors. I think we're still waiting to see what will happen with layoffs. So our job is always to be prepared. So as you mentioned in your intro, we've already put in place mechanisms to make sure the families can get first and foremost food on the table, because that's the critical issue. But we're also working with partners to bring alongside other resources that someone may need, whether it's utility support, mental health resources. I think the thing that we always understand going through this, whether it is a government shutdown, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's a hurricane, the toll on families and communities is significant. And part of what we want to make sure that we do is that we're standing in and stepping into those moments and providing the resources that are necessary. Because generally speaking, in a situation like this, the folks who come into our care would not have been there otherwise.
That's right. Garrett, when you interview different leaders, different kinds of folks that come into your podcast, you're hearing so many different voices. What are you hearing from the community in terms of concerns about the local impacts of the shutdown?
Well, we honestly haven't talked about it a lot on the show, but in my brokerage business, we're starting to see some effects. The good news in all of this is the federal government provides certain guidelines during a shutdown with the flood insurance program, and you're able to write a mortgage without having flood insurance as long as the buyer completes the application, sends it in, and then you have your elevation certificate and the other caveats that go along with that. Plus, the seller of a property has a huge incentive to sell their home, right? They have a vested interest in making the deal work. So we're seeing a lot of sellers right now work with the buyers and getting the buyer to receive the seller's policy. So there's temporary solutions that sellers and buyers are working out. And we're all sort of waiting for things to open back up and move forward.
Is there anything that our residents can do to communicate with their legislators that they want some sort of resolution, some movement in this negotiations?
Well, I'm sure they are hearing from people who are directly affected by this, because that's who, obviously the biggest impact is on. I know there's some people who just think it's not a good thing that we don't have government working. Some people may be okay with it. But I do find, again, Democrats are making an issue of healthcare, right? That's the thing that
that you hear about, yes.
Yeah, that basically this is their leverage point, and it's scary though. It's dangerous though, because we've got Russ Vought from the White House who's threatening to fire all these people, which they tried to do earlier this year. Trump has backed off on that a little bit. We'll see what happens with that. But that's the threat that they knew going into this thing, is that this is a unique White House in terms of the leverage of the huge power they have there, and one of those is to get rid of people who are right now furloughed, maybe not get a chance to get their job back, which I think would be deleterious to everybody, would be concerned about that.